You don't hate people. You hate shallow interactions. And there's a real neurological reason your circle is smaller one most people never notice. You don't avoid socializing because you're awkward or broken. You avoid it because most conversations feel like performing in a play you never auditioned for. Small talk drains you. Group settings exhaust you. And maintaining friendships sometimes feels like a second job you didn't apply for. But here's what nobody tells you. There's actual psychology behind why your circle is smaller than everyone else's, and it's not a flaw. It's how your brain is wired. If you've ever felt guilty for having fewer friends, for declining invitations, for preferring one deep conversation over 10 surface-level ones, this is for you. Because psychology shows that the way you form connections isn't wrong, it's just different. And understanding why changes everything. Let's start with the part most people don't realize. You know that feeling when you're in a social situation and part of your brain is watching you, observing how you stand, analyzing what you just said, wondering if that joke landed or if people thought it was weird, calculating whether you're talking too much or not enough, monitoring your facial expressions, checking if you're making appropriate eye contact. That's self-awareness. And if you have a lot of it, socializing isn't just about interacting with others, it's about managing the internal commentary running in the background the entire time. Most people don't experience this at the same intensity. They say what they feel. They react instinctively. They don't replay conversations in their head for the next 3 days, analyzing what they could have said differently. But you're running a dual processor system. One part of you is in the conversation. The other part is observing, analyzing, adjusting. Here's where the neuroscience gets interesting. Your brain has something called the default mode network, a collection of regions that activate when you're not focused on the external world. It's responsible for self-reflection, introspection, thinking about your own thoughts and behaviors. In people with high self-awareness, this network is more active. It's constantly running diagnostics, constantly checking. How am I coming across? Is this authentic? Am I saying what I actually mean? And here's the problem. Social interaction requires you to activate a completely different brain network, the task-positive network. This is the part of your brain that focuses outward, that listens, that responds in real time, that engages with the world around you. These two networks, they work in opposition. When one is active, the other quiets down. So if your default mode network is humming loudly in the background, your task-positive network has to work harder to break through. You're essentially splitting your cognitive resources between being present in the conversation and monitoring yourself having the conversation. That's exhausting. It's like trying to drive while simultaneously critiquing your driving technique. You can do it, but it drains you faster than it drains someone who just drives. This is why socializing feels different for you. It's not that you're bad at it, it's that your nervous system is doing twice the work. And after a few hours, you're done. Not because you dislike people, but because your internal systems are overheating. Other people leave a party feeling energized. You leave feeling like you just took a cognitive endurance test. And here's the part that makes it worse. Because you're so aware of how you're coming across, you start to assume everyone else is analyzing you too. You think people are noticing every awkward pause, every weird thing you said, every moment you didn't laugh at the right time. But they're not. Most people are too busy thinking about themselves to scrutinize you that closely. But your brain doesn't believe that. So you stay hypervigilant, you stay on guard, and that makes every social interaction feel like a performance you're being graded on. No wonder you prefer staying home. Here's the part nobody realizes. Let's say you're talking to someone. The conversation is going well, they're laughing, they're engaged, they seem interested. But then, they glance at their phone for 2 seconds. Or they shift their body slightly. Or their smile doesn't reach their eyes the way it did a minute ago. And suddenly, your mind is convinced. They're bored. They don't actually want to talk to me. I'm being too much. Or not enough. I should wrap this up. Or maybe I should ask them a question. Wait, did I just ask too many questions? Am I interrogating them? This is where your cognitive filters go into overdrive. The social part of your mind is constantly reading signals, facial expressions, tone of voice, body language, micro-expressions that last a fraction of a second. And if you're someone with a highly active social cognition network, you're picking up on signals that other people don't even notice. The problem? You're also misinterpreting them. Here's why. Your nervous system has something called mirror neurons, cells that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing that action. They're part of how you empathize, how you understand what someone else might be feeling. They help you mirror the emotional states of people around you. But if your mirror neuron system is hyperactive, you start projecting emotions onto others that might not actually be there. Someone looks tired, and you interpret it as disinterest. Someone pauses before responding, and you read it as rejection. Someone says, "We should hang out sometime," and your brain instantly files it under, "They're just being polite." You're reading social cues accurately, but you're adding layers of meaning that don't exist. And here's the cruel irony. You're often wrong in the most painful direction. Research shows that people with high social anxiety and self-awareness tend to underestimate how much others like them. You think the conversation went badly. They thought it went great. You think you were awkward. They didn't notice. You think they were judging you. They were worried you were judging them. Your perception of how you're coming across is almost always harsher than reality. But because you trust your perception, because you felt the discomfort so intensely, you assume it must be true. So you withdraw. You stop reaching out. You convince yourself that people don't really want to be around you, even when the evidence suggests otherwise. This is why smart minds struggle with friendship. Not because they lack social skills, but because they're running a more sensitive detection system that flags false alarms constantly. You're not bad at reading people. You're too good at it. And your nervous system is interpreting neutral signals as negative ones because it's trying to protect you from rejection. And this is where things get unfair. Here's a question. Would you rather have 10 friends who know the surface version of you, or 2 friends who know the real version? If you immediately said 2, that tells you something about how your mind is wired. Most people form friendships based on proximity, shared activities, and social reinforcement. They become friends with coworkers because they see them every day. They stay friends with people from high school because it's familiar. They maintain surface-level relationships because it's easier than letting someone in. But your brain doesn't work that way. Your cognitive filters ask one question over and over: is this connection real? If the answer is no, your brain loses interest. Not because you're judgmental, but because your dopamine system, the part of your brain responsible for motivation and reward, doesn't get activated by shallow interactions. Here's the neuroscience behind it. When you have a meaningful conversation, when someone really sees you and you really see them, your nervous system releases oxytocin. That's the bonding hormone, the one that makes you feel connected, safe, trusted. It's the same chemical that bonds parents to children, partners to each other. It's what makes relationships feel worth the effort. But when you're stuck in small talk, when you're pretending to care about things you don't care about, when you're nodding along to conversations that feel empty, your brain doesn't release oxytocin, it releases cortisol, stress hormone, because your nervous system interprets inauthenticity as a threat. It's saying, this isn't real, we're not safe here, we're performing. And your dopamine system? It's bored. It's not getting the reward it needs to stay engaged. So your motivation to maintain that relationship drops. You're not avoiding people. You're avoiding situations where you can't be yourself. Other people can tolerate, even enjoy surface-level friendships because their brains still get some dopamine from the social reinforcement, the validation, the feeling of being liked, But your brain doesn't value being liked by people who don't really know you. It values being seen by people who actually understand you. That's why your circle is small. You're not filtering people out of cruelty. You're filtering them out of necessity. Your nervous system literally cannot sustain relationships that don't meet a certain threshold of depth. And that's not a flaw. That's a feature. Research shows that people who prioritize quality over quantity in friendships report higher levels of life satisfaction and emotional well-being. Having one close friend you can be real with is more beneficial to your mental health than having 20 acquaintances you perform for. Your brain knows this instinctively. That's why it resists expanding your circle. It's not worth the energy cost if the connection isn't real. But there's a twist. You meet someone new, the conversation is fine, they seem nice, but something feels off. You can't put your finger on it. Maybe it's the way they talked about their ex, or how they interrupted you twice, or the subtle way they turned everything back to themselves, or how they didn't ask you a single follow-up question. Most people don't notice these things, or if they do, they brush them off. Maybe they were just having a bad day. Maybe I'm being too picky. I should give them another chance. But you notice. And once you notice, you can't unsee it. This is where your pattern recognition system comes into play. Your mind is incredibly good at detecting inconsistencies, at noticing when someone's words don't match their actions, at spotting the gap between how someone presents themselves and who they actually are. And here's the thing, you're usually right. People with high emotional intelligence and strong observational skills are better at detecting dishonesty, manipulation, and relational red flags. You pick up on things in the first few interactions that other people don't figure out until months later. By the time they're saying, "I can't believe I didn't see that coming," you already walked away. But this makes friendship harder, because most people reveal themselves slowly. They show you the polished version first, the version they want you to see. And only after weeks or months do the cracks start to show. But you see the cracks immediately. You see the performance. You see the places where they're not being fully honest with you or with themselves. And your brain makes a calculation. This person isn't safe. This connection won't be real. I'm out. Other people might call this being judgmental. But it's not judgment. It's discernment. You're not rejecting people for shallow reasons. You're protecting yourself from investing in relationships that won't meet your needs. Your standards aren't high, they're healthy. And here's the part most people don't understand. You'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who don't really get you. Because loneliness isn't about being physically alone. It's about being with people and still feeling unseen. You've experienced that. The loneliness of being in a crowded room. The isolation of being in a friendship where you can't be yourself. The exhaustion of pretending to fit in. So your brain says, no more. If we're going to spend our limited social energy on someone, it has to be worth it. That's not cold. That's self-preservation. Here's where everything comes together. Most people build friendships on frequency. They see someone often, so they become friends. They text regularly, so they stay friends. The relationship is maintained through repetition, not depth. But your brain doesn't bond that way. Your nervous system bonds through oxytocin, the chemical released during vulnerable, authentic, emotionally meaningful exchanges. And oxytocin doesn't care about frequency, it cares about intensity. You can see someone once a month and feel closer to them than someone you see every day. Because it's not about how often you interact, it's about how real the interaction is. This is why you can go weeks without talking to your closest friends and pick up exactly where you left off. The bond doesn't weaken with distance or time, it's built on something deeper than proximity. But this also means you struggle in environments where relationships are based on constant contact. Work, friendships, social groups that require regular attendance, online communities that expect daily engagement. Your brain doesn't see the value in maintaining those connections if they're not feeding your need for depth. And here's the science behind why that matters. Research on attachment styles shows that people with secure attachment, people who feel safe in relationships, tend to have fewer but closer friendships. They don't need a large social network to feel validated. They need a small number of relationships where they feel truly known. People with anxious or avoidant attachment, on the other hand, often have larger social circles. They're either constantly seeking reassurance through social connection, anxious, or keeping relationships surface level to avoid vulnerability, avoidant. If you're someone with a small circle, it's likely because your attachment style is secure enough that you don't need constant external validation. You're comfortable with yourself. You don't need to be liked by everyone. You need to be understood by someone. That's a sign of strength, not weakness. Your dopamine system also plays a role here. Dopamine is released when you anticipate reward, when you're looking forward to something, when something feels exciting or meaningful. And for you, dopamine isn't triggered by generic socializing. It's triggered by the promise of real connection. This is why you can feel completely unmotivated to go to a party, but deeply excited to have a 2-hour conversation with one person who gets you. These networks aren't malfunctioning, they're just running on different priorities, authenticity over popularity. You're not antisocial, you're selectively social, and that selectivity is what allows you to form bonds that actually last. Studies show that people with smaller, high-quality social networks report lower levels of stress, higher emotional resilience, and stronger overall mental health. Having a few deep connections protects your nervous system better than having dozens of shallow ones. Your brain knows this. That's why it resists expanding your circle. It's not being difficult, it's being efficient. So here's the truth psychology reveals. If you struggle with friendship, it's not because you're bad at it. It's because your brain is wired to value depth over breadth, authenticity over performance, real connection over social validation. You're not broken for having a small circle. You're optimized for meaningful relationships. And that optimization comes with a cost. It means you'll have fewer friends. It means you'll decline more invitations. It means you'll spend more time alone than people who can bond easily over surface-level interactions. But it also means the friendships you do form, they last, they matter, they're built on something real, and that's not a flaw, that's a gift. Your brain isn't rejecting people, it's protecting you. It's ensuring that the relationships you invest in are worth the energy cost. It's filtering for quality because it knows that's what you need to thrive. So, if you've ever felt guilty for not having more friends, for being too picky, for preferring solitude over socializing, let that guilt go. Your nervous system is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's prioritizing your well-being over your popularity. And that's the smartest thing it could possibly do. Comment one thing you love about your small circle and one thing you're tolerating in fake friendships. Because if you made it this far, you're not antisocial, you're selective, and that's something to be proud of.